Hey friends, Powwow guy, Rob Phoenix here. Kind of a quick check-in, but I have a friend that I've been friends with for years. Um, and we met through him contacting me originally about powwowing for him. So he's been, him and I have like kind of gone over to each other's place over the years. He's come over here a lot more than I've gone to his place. But I've been providing him with various medicines and tinctures and such with over the years. So today he came and he brought me a gift. He said, for all, in exchange for all the things that you've done for me over the years, I bought you this gift. It's a book that I don't have. Well, I do now, but it's called A Cunning Man's Grimoire, The Secret of Secrets. It's a somewhat new book. It came out about 6 or 7 years ago. Um, Fantastic book. It's almost like a companion to the Cunning Man's Handbook. Um, that came out some years ago. I can't remember who wrote it because I gave that book to a friend. But anyway, The Cunning Man's Grimoire, fantastic. As soon as he gave it to me, I just like started devouring it and I read through the entire thing today. But I had marked some things that I wanted to talk about. So first of all, I want to talk to you about what's the Cunning Man tradition. The Cunning Man tradition is a European tradition that spanned from about 1400 to 1900. Um, and it was basically all excuse me, excuse me, I apologize. Basically, these European magicians who would take bits and pieces from the grimoires, the European grimoires, magical grimoires that were all the rage during this like 500-year period, that had their roots in medieval Catholicism and Judeo-Christian magical thought. So things like you had Dr. John Dee and the Anunnaki and stuff. You had like the Key of Solomon. You had like the Libra Solomonis, the Libra Lunar, um, the Ars Notoria. You had all these things, I guess, in some to some extent, like Goetia, but maybe not really. But anyway, you had these books like Saint Cyprian. So you had all these old grimoires, and you had these the English, these like Englishmen, and I guess women, but mostly I've heard about men picking up various bits and pieces of these grimoires. Now they were all like Judeo-Christian grimoires that called on things like angels and summon demons in such a way as to command them to do their bidding. But also on a smaller scale, more folksy things like to ward off the bites of mad dogs and such with. So very much it has been my research over the years. For decades I've been doing this. It is my conclusion that powwow is the natural like progression of cunning the cunning folk tradition. Um, so the Cunning Man's Grimoire is basically a book that addresses three or four different cunning men throughout history that have put their books, that put their practices in writing. So the tradition would be these people would gather the information from the grimoires that they have experimented with, and they would call these things experiments rather than rituals. Like here's an experiment to conjure an angel. Here's an experiment to have an angel like protect your house from fire. Um, and put down in their journals what worked for them. If it didn't work, they wouldn't put it there. If it did work, they would put it in their journals. And so this is kind of like a collection, the rituals, experiments, and such that worked for these gentlemen. And so it's become the Cunning Man's Grimoire. Now, the tradition of the Cunning Man is pretty much dead. About a decade ago, I saw a book written called The Cunning, I don't know what it was called, Cunning Craft, maybe. And I bought it and I instantly regretted it because it was basically like this sort of neo-pagan author decided to make it. It was basically a Wicca book. It was garbage. Um, and the author speaks to that kind of stuff here. He speaks about a book called The Cunning Man's Handbook that came out by what's his name? Jim Baker. Jim Baker back in 2014, 2013, 2015, something like that, wrote a book called the Cunning Man's Handbook. Very good book, awesome book. And like I even wrote on the Amazon, reviews. I said the introduction alone was worth the cost of the book because it was kind of a hefty price. It might have been like $50 or something at the time. Um, but the introduction alone is so historically valuable. So he talks about, and the author here, I have all kinds of various bookmarks, so forgive this, but this was just to mark this page. I wanted to read what the author says. So Jim Baker has made an excellent survey not only of the development of magic from 1550 to 1900 as used by the cunning men of that time. So the book chronicles like the growth and progression and the heyday of the cunning man tradition. But he also clearly points out the alien movements and practices that have been introduced into magic since then, such as theosophy. A little unclear about what theosophy is. Masonry, like the Masonic Temple, the Masons. Christian Kabbalah, which I've never heard of. Wicca, which I've heard of and I know is new and silliness. Tarot, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I mean, really, we can trace the tarot as we know pretty much to the Golden Dawn, Arthur Edward Waite. Indian mysticism, which I guess was never really meant to be a part of these like magical traditions. It was its own thing. And spiritualism. Spiritualism was like the contact of the dead. So all of these things since 1900 became kind of lumped into this idea of like magical traditions where they don't belong because they're either new or they're just nonsense or they just don't, they did not mesh well with what was known as magic during that like 500-year period. Um, anyway, I just thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to point that out. But both Jim Baker in the Cunning Man's Handbook, and also uh, the David Rankine and the other author, I can't think of his name right now, in the Cunning Man's Grimoire, agreed that these things are kind of like these new things are just weird. They don't fit the traditional definition of what is a magical tradition. So that right there shoots the idea of these like things as Wicca being this ancient magical tradition is bullshit. It's brand new and it doesn't fit what was known as magic for 500 and some years. What the people were doing, what was known as magic and what was understood as a magical tradition did not include any of that, any of what you see today as like neo-paganism. So anyway, there were five basic tenets, or what they call them as aphorisms. I'm not sure what the basically directions, five different things you kind of had to adhere to in order to successfully practice magic. Now, this is spanning all magical traditions understood during this like 500-year period. Now, remember, these all come from the grimoire traditions, which were Judeo-Christian, Hermetic, kind of magical systems. The first one is if you know secrets, you keep them. So if you know something that's secret, a secret teaching or whatever, keep that to yourself. You don't share it with others. Like I freely share everything I ever learn, but there are a couple of things that I learned that I was asked to not share and asked to keep secret. And so I have those. I've never shared them with anybody. I've never broken any quote unquote oaths that I've taken, as a student or a practitioner of Pennsylvania Dutch powwow. Um, so those secrets will go to my grave with me. But that's the first like tenet or direction with the cunning craft and European magic in general. And magic, remember, at the time was defined as this Judeo-Christian sort of ceremonial magic, the grimoire traditions. The second one was that in all things you do, you call upon God. You call on the name of God by hearty and faithful prayer, desiring the glorious majesty of God the Father, that he will, through your merits and meditation of Jesus Christ, forgive your sins, purify and sanctify you in body, soul, and spirit, mind, soul, and spirit. So, in other words, everything you do is done in the name of the Holy Trinity, as found within Christian tradition. The third direction is that you should avoid the society and the multitude of people. In other words, stay away from people. Don't follow the crowd. Don't be a sheep. Don't just blindly believe whatever you hear. I feel that as a practitioner of powwow, as the older I get, the more I withdraw from the world. Most contact I have with the world is through these YouTube videos, but it's not much of a reciprocal relationship. It's me talking to a screen where all I can see is myself. And you're all out there, if you're watching it, you see me and it seems like I'm talking to you, but there's not much of there's no reciprocity. It is what it is. So I have withdrawn from the world. The fourth one is that you avoid procrastinating, you avoid malice, envy, and make yourself a person who is constant. In other words, this one's saying be a person that does what you say you're going to do. And this is something I learned decades ago. Like, if I say I'm going to do something and then I don't do it, well, then what faith do I have in myself? What faith do I have that, any magic or any rituals or anything I do are going to work? Because if I say I'm going to do something and then don't do it, then my word is no good. So be as good as your word. Like, if you say you're going to do something, be the person that's going to do it. And that way you send a message to yourself. You build that up within yourself that you are a person that I say it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And that's really important. But the fifth kind of direction is the strangest one, I think. It's the one that's a little more like out of touch with the others. The fifth one is that you must know that the seven holy planetary angels are not to be constrained in such a manner as other spirits far inferior. So, in other words, it's what I take from this is that you understand that those seven angels who rule the planets, the planetary hours, and the planetary talismanic, meanings and such are of great importance, and you put them on a pedestal. You don't treat them as inferior spirits, because the tradition of cunning craft really has a lot to do with conjuring, calling upon angels and such with. Um, so how this has survived into modern times, like, it largely has not. There are very few people actually doing this in this day and age. However, we will find the remnants of this, not the complete survival of it, but the remnants of it is within uh, the rituals and practices of the hexenmeister. So there are very few of us. There are very few hexenmeisters, like proper hexenmeisters, like actual hexenmeisters. And this is what we're doing. So another thing is I love it shows. Let's see if you can see this. It's blurry, I'm sorry, but these the planets, the dignities of the planets according to Ptolemy. When I learned astrology, they were called the Ptolemaic dignities. And this shows, like, this tells you about when the planets are in certain signs, they're in their they're in their fall, they're dignified, they're glorified, they're exalted or whatever. planets in various signs do better or worse depending on the sign that they're in. Um, and so that's important to know because you can't just work with everything. Like some timing is better than others. Another thing that the Cunningman knew and that the hexenmeister knows now is the angels, the angelic powers associated with the various planets. So here's, I apologize. I don't know how to show these charts. They get kind of washed out in the light, but anyway, just this is a very good book because it shows all these charts that show like the various planets and such. And another thing this book talks about is the various like what they call fumigations or incenses that you would make. And these incenses, these blends, these recipes are pleasing to the various angels to burn for these various planetary influences during the correct planets and such with. Like, again, I'll try and show you this, but let's see if I can. Yeah. You can't see it, and I apologize. Finally, what I want to show you is one of the things that the cunning men were known for is creating magic circles. Now, these things would be drawn on the floor in chalk and flour or whatever. Like here's an example. Now, the various names of God would be written around it, the various angelic names, crucifixes, Alpha, Omega, and all this situations. Over time, a lot of these circles that would be drawn on the floor just became drawn as talismans on paper. The practice of cunning craft as it was done historically is pretty much a dead tradition. However, we see the ghost of that and the remnants of that within hexenmeister work. We still do a lot of this. And as I said, maybe months or a year ago, this book, the 6 and 7 books of Moses, is very much a part of the hexenmeister tradition. But also this, I was really surprised when I got this today. Such a beautiful gift, but a lot of what is in here is very much a part of the hexenmeister work. So again, you don't need to do any of this stuff as a powwower. This is just if you take it to the next level of like anti-hex work. So just wanted to share that with you guys. I hope that was informative and interesting. Shout out to my friend who bought me this book. It's a beautiful book and I love it. I definitely urge you to check it out. But there you go. So God bless you guys. Love you. We'll talk soon.